All right, it is 11:05. I think maybe we should get going. So thanks everyone on this call and also watching on Facebook. If you have found this event through Councilman Sandoval's page or Councilman Torres's page, today we're going to be discussing the West Area Plan draft recommendations that the steering committee and the planners and council offices have been working on. We've got Eugene Howard returning now currently I think Ask a Planner All-Star. This is his second time on Ask a Planner. And he will be giving a short walkthrough of where the draft recommendations are. And after that, we'll open it up to just Q&A discussion. Also very happy to welcome Councilman Torres today. It's fantastic she can join us. Her staff's on here as well. And so I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Torres to make a statement if she would like before turning it back over to Eugene for his presentation.
Thank you, Naomi, and thank you everybody for tuning in, and to Eugene for making some time about this really important project that's happening in West Denver. Thanks to Ask a Planner for making some room for this. We share this project with 3 council districts, Council District 1, 3, and 7. And so it's taken all of us just a lot of energy and enthusiasm to see this project to this point where we want to continue to get some feedback and make sure that you have a good sense of how this impacts your neighborhood and maybe your property, or what you want to see happen along major corridors like Colfax and Federal and Alameda. I think there's some really interesting work that's both proposed here and that you might have something to say about. So there are 3 different sections that Eugene has worked so hard to pull input from surveys and in-person meetings and virtual meetings, and to a point where we can give some feedback on maps. And I always like to work at a visual level. So thank you, Eugene, for all the hard work in getting it to this point. But I really just want to challenge and really just generate some enthusiasm among residents who are in all of the neighborhoods in the West Area Plan to think about your community and where you see it in the next 10 to 15 years, because in city council, community planning and development, transportation and infrastructure throughout the city, this is a plan that we'll refer to when we'll say, what does this collection of neighborhoods, what do they start to look like over the next decade? So thank you for taking some time here, for diving in deeply with a couple really wonderful planners, Naomi and Eugene. And I look forward to seeing this discussion and all of the future discussions about how this plan is coming together. Thank you so much, Naomi.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. And Eugene, the floor is yours.
All right, well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Eugene Howard, Senior City Planner with the City and County of Denver. Really appreciate the opportunity to come back and continue the conversation on where we are with the West Area Plan. Thank you to the council offices for really being great strategic partners with us and helping us get the word out, really helping to communicate about this planning process with so many of you, and for all of you who are either listening or watching today, for taking the time to really participate with us today. So I think I might be giving a little bit of feedback here, so I'm going to turn off my phone. And I'm going to share my presentation that I have for you today. And really just invite you all to ask questions, put things in the chat, and we'll continue to monitor and get ready to respond to those as best we can. All right, so I think this is the right presentation. And I am going to put it in slide share mode. There we go, awesome. So I'm going to walk you all through the draft language. I won't go into a ton of detail or else we'd be here for a long time. But I did just want to point out, and as a reminder of the 6 neighborhoods that the West Area Plan covers, we are covering the West Colfax neighborhood, Villa Park, Sun Valley, Val Verde, Barnum West, and Barnum. So those are the 6 neighborhoods in the 3 council districts that this plan covers. So today I really tried to group our draft language into some categories, and I'll start by walking through very high level policy direction on where we are with land use and economy. And again, we've heard a great deal from many of you through surveys, in-person meetings, and we could do that. And then over the last year, we've really worked hard with the steering committee, which is made up of members from each of the 6 neighborhoods, and business owners and nonprofit organizations. Many of your friends and neighbors have been involved in this process to really help us understand what your priorities are. So I'll very quickly try to go over some of those high-level themes that we heard. And really, first and foremost, we've heard a great deal about what we refer to as form and compatibility. So as people come into the community or renovating their homes, or perhaps are wanting to do a new project, we've heard how important it is for new development to fit into and respond to the surrounding character and nature of community. So we've got a handful of policies that are really meant to highlight that desire from the community, to really make sure that we continue to see things be more in keeping with what has been a part of your neighborhoods and your communities, really, since you all have been there. So I'm not going to read these to you. We will be coming out with a survey in the next couple of weeks. So you'll have an opportunity to see this language and sit with it and go through it and digest it. So again, I'm just going to touch today on those high-level themes so that when you do get a chance to see the survey, you'll know what's contained in it. Keeping along the same topic of form and compatibility, we've heard a lot about the type and the quality of design. Now, design is subjective, and we all recognize that many of us have things that we love and things that maybe we don't like as much. But we really want to make sure that as we talk about the size and how things fit within existing places, that we also talk about the materials. So whether that be brick or front porches, making sure that doors sort of face the street and really are inviting elements. We've heard a lot about the design and the sort of aesthetic approaches to development that we really want to make sure that we highlight in the planning process here. We've heard a good bit also about the desire for community needs and benefits being met through these new opportunities with development. So whether it's the utilization of an existing sort of old school storefront, if anyone wants to come in and sort of look to revitalize some of these places that tend to fall along our old streetcar lines, doing so in a thoughtful way and really trying to encourage and promote and support small businesses who may want to come in and really truly serve the needs of the community. And then with our larger opportunities, much like the Stadium District, the southern parking lots at Mile High, I still call it Mile High, that is looking to have a new vision for itself and really turning the parking lots into a community that everyone can benefit from. So when that happens, what are some other ways that new development in those parking lots can help serve the needs of the surrounding neighborhoods? In the Cloverleaf, hopefully you all have heard that the city is working with CDOT to really rethink the Colfax, West Colfax and Federal Boulevard interchange. It was designed at a time when everyone, 50, 60 years ago thought that Federal Boulevard might be what ultimately turned into I-25. And so now that we don't necessarily have a major freeway where this interchange occurs, we've had some opportunities to look at and explore different ways that we might utilize that space. And more importantly, and the leading desire for even exploring opportunities there is around pedestrian safety. We recognize that there are some challenges with safety with such a large interchange that's really meant for a highway being in a neighborhood. And so we, the city, with our partners at CDOT, are really looking at ways that we can make some pretty significant improvements to that area that would also really truly work towards making that a safe place for people. Another big theme that we've heard a lot about is really preserving existing structures. Instead of seeing old homes and old buildings get torn down, are there ways for us to really truly incentivize those buildings being kept? And looking for ways that we might make those incentives or make policies that really encourage the reuse of an existing structure. Reusing existing structures not only makes them generally more affordable because you're not replacing the whole thing, it really speaks to our desires around climate as a city, because we're putting less in landfills or having to use less energy to replace a building when we can modify an existing building. So we really want to look for ways to encourage the preservation and the adaptive reuse of existing structures. And this is another slide and some additional policies that speak to the preservation and reuse. We think that we can help minimize the impacts to costs by encouraging the reuse of a building, because if you're making modifications to it, then there's less money needed to recover your investment because you're not doing a wholesale change. So we think that there are some ways to make preservation work for affordability, whether that be residential, where people are living, as well as our small businesses. And thinking about the economic vitality of places, not only do we want to encourage reinvestment in places that exist today, we also want to make sure that we are thinking about how people connect to these commercial areas. How might we create or promote programs that the city has for small businesses so that a small mom and pop can reinvest in themselves and modernize their HVAC, for example, that makes their place a more welcoming and inviting business for those who come there and frequent it, and make sure that the systems, the electricity, all those things that we don't always see are staying up to code to really allow a small business to really do what they want to do best, which is serve the needs of community. So we're looking at some ways that we can hold up existing programs and perhaps even create new programs that would help create economic vitality within our existing commercial areas. And then, of course, there's the people. All of you are so important to us, and we want to make sure that if you are looking to start a small business or you have one and you're working really hard to keep it, that we really want to look for ways that you, the small business owner, can stay in community and serve the people that you've come to know, the folks who are your neighbors and friends. Moving on to mobility, which is really the movement of people and goods. We have heard quite a bit around the desire and the need for safety improvements, as well as more connections. So we are wanting to continue the conversation with you all in the community, as well as our partners within the city, the largest one being the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, which is formerly known as Public Works, to look for some opportunities to really make some improvements to our streets and our sidewalks to really help facilitate the movement of people. We as a city are really focused on people first and making the safety enhancements and the connections to really help us as individuals have choice in how we choose to get around within our city. And so we have, this map is a little bit complicated. I won't go into great detail, but we are looking at ways to set priorities. So for certain streets, the priority should be people. In other cases, we recognize that the car is meant for our key corridors, like a Sheridan or an Alameda. But it's not only just for the cars. We can talk about transit. We can talk about safe places for bicycles to connect, and really making sure that we are hearing you and addressing maintenance needs. So whether you're walking or rolling, you have a safe way and safe routes to get around within your community. In addition to this, we are thinking about some new connections. We recognize that the river and the highway pose some pretty significant barriers to get across. And so you'll see these larger circles on the map along the eastern side are where we've heard that some new connections getting across the river and getting across the highway might make it easier and more beneficial for us to move people in and out of the city core. We've heard some desire about perhaps an additional crossing across 6th Avenue. Now that's a really big idea and will take a great deal of additional background work and engineering and analysis. So we can't say that will happen right now today, but we did hear very clearly that there is a desire for more north-south connectivity. And so one of the places that we've heard that we ought to consider is around Tennyson Street, somewhere in sort of the western side of the plan area. So we're capturing these ideas, we're marking things up. Councilwoman Torres talked about us marking up on maps, which we've done a lot of, because we need to capture these ideas so that we can continue to explore them and really work as best we can to turn the ideas into reality. There we go. Transportation demand management. So as new developments come into the neighborhoods, as we think about those large opportunities, whether it be the Stadium District or around the Cloverleaf, we know that as we look to accommodate more people, that also still today will come with the need for more movement. But it doesn't always have to be about everyone owning their own individual car. Now, cars are personal choice. We all make different choices. But I think where this plan and us as city officials, where we sort of fall in, is making sure that you have options and choice. So transportation demand management is a program where we really want to work with the private sector so to encourage them to offer a variety of different choices. So if one day I want to drive, I can hop in my car and do so. But maybe the next day I want to ride a bike. And maybe the development offers a bike program where I can go and check out a bike. Or rent a car or call a car on demand to come pick me up and to move me around. So this is really a concept that is meant to really look at ways to provide choice so that we can, as best we can, minimize the impacts on our roadway and on our road networks by providing additional options for people to consider and use. Speaking of bikes, we really have been working with our colleagues in DOTI, the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, and their bike planners. A lot of planning work has already been done really throughout the city, but particularly here in the West, we've got a pretty strong foundation for a future bike connection system. We have been working through the West area process to make sure that those pre-planned routes are still the ones that are of interest to you in the community. And we also wanted to make sure that we look for additional opportunities. So are there other places that you want to get to? Are there connections that we need to make? So we're really looking at completing and building out a bike network that will really help the facilitation of the movement of people, and do so with the highest level of comfort possible. So we've got a handful of places that are already on the map, if you will, for future consideration. We've got some places where we've heard that additional connections might be appropriate in places that people want to get to, and then some gaps in the system that we can look to close. Thinking about the pedestrian and the pedestrian sort of network and infrastructure, safety is paramount to our city, and making sure that safety is looked at equitably across all neighborhoods. Now, we have grown our pedestrian network well over 100 years in the city. And at different points in our city's evolution and background and history, we had different sort of standards that we abided by. And so today, Here in 2021, it means that we have a variety of different facilities. Is kind of how we talk about sidewalks. We have some that are right up against the road. We have some that are set back. But we as a city have been really looking at our pedestrian infrastructure. We've been looking at new ways to use more modern approaches to how we go about building and providing sidewalks. And so what it means is we have opportunities to really utilize our new standards where we are introducing new development or have the opportunity to piggyback off of other projects, whether it's a roadway reconfiguration, let's put in the right kind of sidewalk. But we also want to make sure that while we are taking advantage of projects and opportunities where they exist, that we also be thoughtful about the places in community where there may not be an opportunity to piggyback off of another project. So to identify those key areas, so connections to schools, connections to grocery stores or to transit, and making sure that we prioritize those areas that will accommodate the largest number of people who are trying to get to key locations, and that we make sure that we are channeling our investment dollars into those places. So we've got a series of policies that are looking to help us set those priorities, and hearing from you will also be really helpful for us in that effort. You all in the West have a great Gulch and trail network, which is a wonderful way to get off the street and have an opportunity to sort of be in a little green environment that also then connects you both to transit, to downtown, and to other parts of the community. But one of the things that we've heard is that in some places, we can make sure that it's really clear how to connect to that trail network. So signage, wayfinding, making sure that it's really clear and obvious to someone who might be new to the area, or maybe who doesn't use the trail system on a regular basis. We want to make sure that we are highlighting and identifying how you connect to that system. And so this map shows a few places where we've heard from the community where those opportunities exist for us to explore. Transit is another way that people choose to get around. And we really want to make sure that as a city, we continue to invest in our transit system. So we have a couple of different ways that we look at transit. We think about those areas like a West Colfax and a Federal Boulevard, where lots of people get moved through bus. And so we really want to make sure that we are making ongoing investments in those corridors so that we can continue to move people in ways that are comfortable to them, safe for them, that really gives you the choice to get out of your car if you choose to and take a trip by train or by bus. So we've got some opportunities to really enhance and look for ways to make improvements to connections to transit and just the overall functionality of transit, so that it is actually really a strong, viable choice for you when it's convenient for you to use transit. And in addition to that, we really want to make sure that at our transit stops and stations, that we are providing you all with the information that you need to use transit efficiently, a comfort, so that if it's raining or if it's hot, which we're getting into summer now, that you have the shade, you've got some shelter, and that the facilities themselves are just really comfortable and make it easy for you to use them. And so we've got some places that we are looking at to make those kinds of improvements. My last big section here is over quality of life. And these are often what I call sort of those feel-good opportunities. But before we get to the parks and our trails and our open spaces, we really need to acknowledge some of the challenges that history has created over the arc of time. The map that you may see here is really our inverted L, which you may have heard many of us in the city refer to. And it shows places that over time have not had the benefit of the same level of investment. And what that has resulted in is parts of our city having some ground to cover to sort of catch up, if you will. We've had past practices that really discriminated against communities of color, and that is still seen in our built environment. And we don't want to hide from that. We don't want to be shy. We need to understand, recognize, and embrace that situation so that we can make the right changes to correct those past practices and those past decisions. And really, our way of doing that in the West is by really truly featuring and making a statement with health and the environment, and making sure that the investments that we make moving forward are promoting and improving health outcomes and what we refer to as environmental resiliency. So we are developing policies and recommendations to really truly take that topic on head on. Moving us in the direction of thinking about our environment and it being one that is resilient. We're thinking and have heard a lot about opportunities to introduce more green systems. So as we look at where we might need to make investments in our sidewalk infrastructure, while we're at it, let's talk about water quality. Are there ways for us to bring in those tree lawns where we can then add green to the street, which provides shade, which helps with the reduction of heat, provides more comfort so that you will choose to walk knowing that you'll be shaded and that the overall environment is one that feels and looks pleasant and inviting. So we are looking at not only key corridors, meaning our streets, for some opportunities to make them greener and more comfortable, but we've talked about alleys. You know, in certain parts of our city, we have huge assets in our alleys. They are places where we might choose to be because they're quieter, calmer, more comfortable. So if we're already using our backyards and our alleys for movement and for comfort, maybe we have an opportunity to be even more intentional in where we channel some of our investments to create sort of that secondary network where you might choose to move around and have it be one that is also addressing some of the health and environmental opportunities for correction. And then, of course, water and managing water, cleaning and filtering water before it finds its way to the South Platte River. Next, in the big topic of quality of life are our park facilities, parks and recreation. The map that you might see in front of you for those who are looking at a screen really shows the access and the connections to open space. And the West is doing pretty darn good as far as having folks live within a 10-minute walk of some open space and some green space. But it also does mean that we still have opportunities. Of course, we want to continue to invest in our parks and open spaces. And so we're looking at ways and places where we can continue doing so, not only to provide comfort and opportunities for recreation for you as residents, but to also be mindful of our climate goals and bringing down the heat island effect, if you will, from large surfaces that don't have greenery. And so we've got a few things like that that we're working through in the plan. Thinking again more about the connections to our gulches, our trails, and our waterways, and being really thoughtful in how we do that. Recognizing that we are not the first people to have been here, that there have been civilizations that were here in North America well before many of us or our ancestors showed up. And we want to make sure that we are being mindful and thoughtful of our First Nations and our Indigenous peoples this was home, this was their home before we got here. And are there ways for us to highlight and hold up that history? And it's both history and it's current day. So how do we really truly recognize that beauty and the assets that we have in all of the cultures who call West Denver home, past, current, and future, and have that reflected in our built environment, and particularly in our natural areas. Thinking about food. Food is a really big topic right now for a whole host of reasons. And we have opportunities to move and continue to build on our food system, a complete food system, and leveraging some of the opportunities that we think you have told us about and that we think exist in the West neighborhoods. And that's everything from growing food, making sure that we can produce food more locally. So again, minimizing our environmental impact by having food sourced and grown in closer connection to us as a city. And then letting that also be opportunities for businesses and business and economic activity. And then thinking about our built environment and opportunities to sculpt, if you will, where things go, how things are placed on a property to really truly promote connections and safety and security. Many of us have, I think, or hope, many of us have heard about the number of people in a place and the eyes on the street, just as a way of promoting that sense of community and the sense of safety. So front porches that many of you have in your neighborhoods in West Denver, let's make sure that we continue to promote and encourage new development to have those front porches so that you can have a place to relax at the end of the day and connect with your neighbors as they go by. And so thinking about ways that our built environment can help promote community building, and safety and security. And then arts and culture. The West area is rich with all sorts of wonderful art installations and places where we can introduce art as a part of the built environment. And we want to continue to encourage the use of art as a way of building and creating and adding to and capitalizing off of the community that is there and really truly reflecting the folks who make up West Denver through these things that are relatively low cost in comparison to building a new building. Having a mural on the side, supporting local talent or a piece of art that might be produced by a local artist. Just ways to continue to reflect who we are as Denverites in the West. We really want to make sure that we speak to that in this planning effort. And then I think this is my last slide, and I'll be happy to take questions. Pets are popular in Denver. Lots of people love to have their four-legged friends. And the good news for us in Denver is that our animal protection and control division has lots of opportunities and programs that can help individuals care for their four-legged friends. And so we just have an opportunity to even hold that up and speak to it for the West area. And we really just want to make sure that we make sure you all know about the programs that are available to you to help keep your pets and animals healthy and safe, and really just continue all of us to be good stewards with our four-legged furry friends. So I believe that is my last slide. I know that was a lot, but please continue to stay connected with us. This is my contact information. So at any time, any of you can reach out to me by email is best. And also if you want to just learn more about the planning process and where we are and how to get involved, denvergov.org/Westplan is how you can connect to all of the information that we've collected to date and to really continue to be involved in this planning effort. So I know that was a lot, but thank you very, very much for your patience while I went through this material, and I will stop talking and see if there are any questions I can answer.
Thank you so much, Eugene. I know that's a lot to get through, and you covered it very well. The plans, for those who don't know, the plan documents that come out of this I mean, they end up being hundreds of pages long. I think one of them is at least, like 220 pages long or so. There's going to be a lot of content. So feel free, for those who are on the Zoom call, to put some questions into the chat and we can ask them. Or since we're kind of a small group, I can just unmute you if you want to raise your hand. We've also got Facebook, some questions there. So maybe we could start off with Eugene. How can people, if maybe this is the first time they're hearing about this process, how can they get involved? What are kind of the next steps that are going to happen?
So there's a few ways to get involved. First and foremost, you can reach out to me directly with my email. And for anyone who maybe can't see, it's Eugene, EUGENE .Howard, HOWARD @denvergov.org is how you can email me. Myself or members of our team, more than happy to connect with you individually or with any groups and organizations. If this is the first time you're hearing about it or you'd like more information, reaching out and scheduling time to meet with one of the planning team members, that's one way to get sort of up to speed in where we are. Of course, our website has all of our past meeting materials, and so you can kind of see the evolution of our process over time. So that's another great resource. And then moving forward, we will be coming out with a survey sometime in the May timeframe where you will see these policies again. We might be fine-tuning them between now and then because there's always that process. But we will then be asking you to weigh in and tell us, do you agree? Are there other things that we should be considering? So there will be ways for you to continue to provide input and feedback and to let your voices be heard in this process. So the review of the policies is the next big step. And whatever we learn from hearing from you all will then be lead us to the next big milestone, which we anticipate will take place this summer. And that is putting out a first draft of the plan, which would have a lot of that detail that Naomi just mentioned, and a lot more maps and information and graphics than what you saw today. And so by summer, we hope to have that out, and that too will have an opportunity for you to provide input and feedback. We'll take that feedback, make revisions, continue to work with the council offices and our steering committee members and our key stakeholders, make those refinements, and then late summer come out with yet another draft for you all to respond to. And hopefully by then we will be getting really, really close to capturing everyone's ideas so that we can then begin to move the plan towards adoption. So our goal is to have the plan go through the city council adoption process before the year is over. So then our agencies can get to work taking all your great ideas and turning them into reality. So that's kind of the timeline left for the West Plan.
Great, thanks, Eugene. We have a question in the chat. We've got David Sabatis on listening in, who writes the North Star and has been following, of course, our near Northwest plan that's going to be kicking off closely. And I think he has a really great question that can maybe help clarify sort of what these plans do in addition to the timeline. And David, I'll read off your question and let Eugene answer, and then I'll just happy to unmute you. You can go ahead and directly ask any follow-ups. So David was wondering about timing and kind of when we will have more details. So he said, when does, for instance, the phrase encourage and incentivize the inclusion of public art become something much more specific, like here's $500,000 that are going to local muralists to create art in 10 locations, for example. And I think that brings up a good question that is often really confusing for people of how high level these plans are and how they're not that specific in terms of stipulating dollar amounts and locations of things, but they set up, they basically are a platform and sort of are an enabling direction for those kind of programs to be created later. If you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure, that's a great question. And before I became a planner, I was a Northwest Denver resident and sitting behind the screen like many of you are today and having the same types of questions. So really with a neighborhood plan or an area plan like this, as Naomi said, we are really capturing what the community priorities are. We really want to capture those and incorporate them in a document that then becomes a reference. So when there's future work, whether that's public work or from the private sector, we have a document that shows what your priorities and aspirations and visions are, and we can point people to it. It's like, oh, you want to do a project in this area. Well, in this area, affordable housing is important, and also important will be mobility and connectivity, making sure that you do have trees. Oh, and by the way, art would also be a thing to include in your project. So we don't necessarily dictate outcomes through this planning effort, but make really strong, heavy recommendations on what you as community members wish for. And it also then allows us as a city to set up other programs that help implement our plans. So with regard to art, I'm not going to get all the details right on this, but I believe any project over a certain dollar amount, 1% of that project has to go for public art. So that is an example of how art is incorporated into larger projects. And so, you know, and I don't know if that policy came from a plan, but that's a way that the plans and the ideas from community can be realized in a policy moving forward. So understanding what your priorities are then allows us as a city to develop the policies, the programs, the funding mechanisms to really make implementation occur. And so I'm not sure if I'm getting exactly at the question, but this is a step in that process of making things a reality.
David, would you like to ask any follow-up questions? I think you can just unmute yourself and or turn your camera on if you want, no pressure.
I'm good. I think that mostly summed it up for me. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. So we've got Alan on Facebook with a question. And we covered this a little bit, but is there any way you could dive a bit further into, I think what a lot of people are really concerned about, of course, which is the affordability of housing, especially the new housing that's being built. And I know we talked about how preserving existing housing, reusing existing housing is a part of recommendations in the plan. But what else specifically may come out of this? And maybe examples of some programs and things like that this could, again, provide sort of the justification for applying that would really help with not just, $800,000 duplex units being built in the plan area.
So you're absolutely right. We are hearing and have been for some time now hearing a great deal of concern around housing prices and housing affordability. One of the things that we hope will be an outcome of this planning effort, and not just this one, but really planning throughout the entire city, is a recognition of the need and the identification of a variety of different potential tools that then we as a city can look for ways to make a reality. So here's an example, and just as a high level example, there could be a residential area, whether it be in West or really anywhere in the city, where today the only thing you can build is a single family home. So if you have a 700,000 or 7,000 square foot lot, and the only thing you can build on that is a single family home, Now, you as an individual, you may choose to build a home that meets your needs, that's a modest size and within your affordable comfort zone. But for a person who's in the business of building homes, and this isn't a criticism, so I want to make that very clear. But in our US capitalistic society, we tend to want to get the highest amount of return that we can on our investments. That's just how our society is set up. So if you are able on that 7,000 square foot lot, if you could build 1,000 square foot home or a 4,000 square foot home, and what you are hearing is that there are people who want that larger home, more bedrooms and that sort of thing. And you as a builder can make a profit off of that. Chances are you're going to move in that direction. But what that does not do is address everyone who needs a home. So we may be looking for ways to incentivize the smaller homes that can be at a price point that more people can afford and attain, so that we're not only getting the 4,000 square foot outcome, but we're getting a variety of different outcomes. And so it could be trying to incentivize the smaller home, and for that builder, perhaps even a smaller amount of profit. Or perhaps it's maybe we ought to look for ways to, in addition to the single family home, allow duplexes or a single family home in an ADU or triplexes. So what are the desired outcomes for the community that then we could look to incentivize as a city to make it attractive for the home builder to build the product that people need? And so step one, and I know this is a slower process than many of us would like, but the very first part of this is identifying the community's needs. And we know affordable housing is a need. So we got that. Now, how do we make housing affordable? Is it more housing choice and options? And if so, how do we encourage that outcome? Is it making homes that are a little bit smaller that fit into the existing character and nature of an existing community? If that is true, then how do we incentivize that outcome? So it all starts with understanding what is desired by the community, and then it's on us to capture that in a plan, let that plan be adopted so it becomes the rules or policy, and then we look for ways to deliver or encourage the desired outcomes based off of what you've told us and what are the rules in place. Sorry, that's a long answer.
It's always a long answer. It's really complicated. But
Yeah.
Thank you again for walking us through that. We've got only 7 minutes left, but I've got a question here about how other plans that are going on or have already gone on kind of fit into this. And I think you mentioned already with talking like to the bike network people, and using the neighborhood planning initiative as another opportunity to reach out to the community and say, hey, like, are we still getting your priorities right? But maybe can you think of a couple of other plans that are going on that will fit into this, and sort of how they fit into it, or what opportunities this plan does have to tweak those or offer suggestions to them?
Great question. So I have two answers. I'll try to make them short. With regard to the West area, one of our responsibilities in this process is to understand what those other projects are that are happening, and to make sure that we as a city are working together collaboratively so that all of these projects are in support of one another as much as they can and should be. So a good example of that, you as voters approved bond funding, I think now about 2 years ago, $900 million in bond funding. And some of that money is going to make transit and in pedestrian improvements along West Colfax. So one of the projects in that bond package was to look at West Colfax and look at safety and crossings and intersections. Through that process, identifying some key intersections where people were having some challenges going north and south. And then what can we do to make those conditions better? So that process, while separate from ours, is one where we could draw inspiration from. So not just for West Colfax, but what did that process, that plan or project, what did it learn? And how might we take the lessons learned and apply them in other places? So that's one way that we look to partner with city agencies to capitalize off of work that they are doing anyway, to look for ways to incorporate it into the West Plan. Another I'll try to make it quick, ways that we see our plans work is an example from the Montbello community. Our very first neighborhood plan was done in the far northeast, much like we are doing now. Community came in, they told us what their priorities were, they identified some opportunities, we captured those ideas in a plan, and now I'm really happy to say that many of those ideas are going on to the next step, where other agencies have taken those ideas out of the plan and they're looking for ways to make them a reality. One of the things that we heard a lot about in the far northeast was the need for additional grocery retail. The community really spoke out in support of wanting more grocery store choices. And I won't say that it's entirely because of the plan. That would not be true, and it would be a little self-serving because so many people in the city are always working really hard every day to address these types of issues. However, I will say that because I think it was captured in a plan document that became like tools and regulation, it made it easier to connect the dots between what the community wished for and then the people who provide those types of services. So they're getting a natural grocer. I think that there's another grocery retailer that is looking to come into the far northeast area. In addition to the additional grocery retail opportunities that are happening there, we're working to meet the needs of the community around fresh, healthy food. There's also connections to those new services. So sidewalks are going in, trees are going in so that people can feel comfortable getting to and from the grocery stores. One other big obstacle was Peoria and people having some safety concerns moving up and down north and south along Peoria and getting to the commuter rail station. And so the city was able to hear that, work with CDOT to add a component to the Central 70 project that was specifically meant to provide a wider multi-use path on Peoria sidewalk, an enhanced sidewalk that really truly addressed the pedestrian needs of that community. And I don't know if that would have happened without hearing that from the community and then marshaling all of the efforts in partnership with CDOT to say, hey, CDOT, you're already here. You're already kind of doing this big major project. If we put what amounts to, for them, a few dollars towards it, can you put in this multi-use path? And long story short, they were able to do it. And now that community has a safer, more comfortable way to get to and from the commuter rail station than they had before, because it wasn't even really on the radar until this planning effort was underway. So those are just two ways that our plans can really truly result in partnerships with other city agencies to have the outcomes that the communities are asking for.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Eugene. And we are right on time. It's 11:59. Thank you again so much for being here. Again, if anybody has follow-up questions or watching this after the fact, we're going to posted on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. Feel free to reach out to Eugene with questions. I'm also going to post the plan website that you can go to for updates. And thank you so much and have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks so much. Bye.